let me say something that might make you uncomfortable. Money matters more than we're willing to admit. Not in the flashy way. Not in the luxury cars and big houses way. We've been taught that caring about money is shallow. That if you really cared about happiness, purpose, or peace, money wouldn't be such a big deal. And yet, think about this. Not in a dramatic way. Just a low hum. The kind that shows up when you're standing in a grocery store, comparing prices, pretending you're just being smart. The kind that appears when you get a message from your landlord, your bank, or your phone company, and your body tightens before your brain even reads the words. The kind that sneaks into conversations with people you love. Not directly, just as tension, as irritation, as silence. We like to say money doesn't matter, but we organize our entire lives around it. Our schedules, our sleep, our stress levels, our confidence, even our personalities. And here's the strange part. Most people don't realize how deeply money is shaping their behavior until they feel trapped by it. They think they're tired because they're lazy. They think they're anxious because they overthink. They think their relationships are strained because people are complicated. But underneath all of it, there's often one quiet pressure shaping every decision. Money, not the desire to be rich, just the need to feel safe. And that's where the story usually gets twisted. Because the moment someone admits they want financial security, the world has opinions. You shouldn't care so much about money. Money doesn't buy happiness. Just be grateful for what you have. Those phrases sound wise. They sound mature. They sound emotionally evolved. But they also shut down an honest conversation about reality. Because wanting stability isn't greed. It's biology. Your nervous system doesn't care about motivational quotes. It cares about predictability. It cares about knowing you'll be okay next month. And when that's missing, everything feels harder. You start making smaller decisions, safer decisions, shorter-term decisions. Not because you lack ambition, but because your brain is trying to protect you. Here's the part nobody really says out loud. When money is tight, your world shrinks. You say no to things you'd otherwise consider. You stay longer in places that drain you. You tolerate situations that quietly erode your confidence. Not because you want to, because you feel you have to. And over time, that does something to a person. You stop thinking in years. You think in weeks, sometimes days. You don't plan. You manage. You don't dream. You cope. And then, one day, someone tells you that money doesn't matter. And a part of you feels angry, but you can't quite explain why. It's because deep down, you know that's not true. You know money isn't about happiness itself. It's about the asterisk absence of constant pressure asterisk. It's about waking up without immediately calculating. It's about choices feeling like choices, not traps. And if you've ever wondered why you feel exhausted even when nothing dramatic is happening, why your patience is shorter than it used to be, why small problems feel heavier than they should, this is probably closer to the reason than you think. Money doesn't just sit in a bank account. It sits in your body, in your shoulders, in your sleep. And here's the uncomfortable truth. A lot of the advice that tells you money doesn't matter comes from people who don't have to think about it anymore. They've crossed a line where the basics are handled, where emergencies are inconveniences, not disasters, where saying no doesn't feel dangerous. From that side of the line, money looks optional. From this side, it looks like gravity. Invisible, constant, impossible to ignore. This video isn't about convincing you to chase wealth. It's not about becoming obsessed with numbers or status. It's about something much simpler. Honesty. Honesty about how money quietly controls our time, our energy, and our emotional bandwidth. Honesty about why so many people feel stuck without knowing exactly what they're stuck in. And honesty about the fact that wanting financial breathing room isn't a character flaw. It's a human response to a system that demands payment just to participate. If you've ever felt guilty for caring about money, if you've ever downplayed your stress to seem more grateful, if you've ever told yourself others have it worse while still feeling overwhelmed, this conversation is for you. Because pretending money doesn't matter hasn't made anyone freer. It's just made them quieter about their struggle. And before we talk about solutions or steps or changes, we need to talk about what's actually happening in real life. The small moments, the daily behaviors, the silent trade-offs, the things nobody posts about. That's where the truth starts. Let's slow this down and make it real. Not theoretical, not dramatic, just everyday life. Picture a normal weekday. You wake up already tired, even if you slept enough. Your first thought isn't excitement or purpose. It's a quiet checklist. What needs to be paid? What can wait? What might break next? You scroll your phone while getting ready, not because you enjoy it, but because it distracts you from that tight feeling in your chest. The news feels heavy. Social media feels noisy. Everyone seems to be doing either much better than you or pretending they are. You tell yourself not to compare, but your brain does it anyway. Not hatred, not panic, just a dull sense of here we go again. You don't mind working. At some point during the day, money shows up again. Maybe it's a message. Maybe it's a reminder. Maybe it's just a thought that interrupts your focus for no clear reason. You calculate something in your head. Can I afford this right now? Should I wait until next month? What if something unexpected happens? These questions don't feel dramatic. They feel constant. And because they're constant, they start shaping your behavior in subtle ways. You choose the cheaper option, even when it doesn't really serve you. You delay things you know would help because now doesn't feel like the right time. You say maybe later so often that later becomes a habit. It's not that you never enjoy yourself. It's that enjoyment comes with a quiet aftertaste of guilt. Every purchase feels like a small moral decision. Every break feels slightly irresponsible. Every moment of rest has an invisible price tag attached. And when people talk about following your passion, or taking risks or changing your life, something inside you shuts down. Not because you don't want more, but because you can't see how to get there without things falling apart first. So you stay practical, responsible, realistic. You learn to live inside limits you didn't consciously choose. And over time, that does something strange. You stop asking certain questions. Not out loud, not intentionally. They just fade. What do I actually want? What kind of life would feel good to wake up to? What would I do if money wasn't constantly part of the calculation? Those questions feel dangerous because they don't come with clear answers. So instead, you focus on getting through the week. You manage stress instead of eliminating it. You optimize discomfort instead of questioning it. You become very good at surviving. And on the outside, everything looks fine. You're functioning. You're showing up. You're doing what you're supposed to do. But inside, there's a low-level tension that never really leaves. It shows up in small ways. You're more irritable than you want to be. Little inconveniences feel bigger than they should. You feel guilty for being tired and tired of feeling guilty. When someone asks how you're doing, you say fine automatically. Not because you're lying, because explaining the truth would take too long. And maybe the hardest part is this. You don't feel broke enough to complain, but you don't feel secure enough to relax. So you sit in this uncomfortable middle space, not struggling loudly, not thriving quietly, just constantly managing. This is where a lot of people live, even if they never name it. And because there's no crisis, it's easy to dismiss how much it's affecting you. You tell yourself things like, "This is just how adulthood feels. Everyone is tired. I should be grateful. It'll get better eventually." But eventually keeps moving. Years pass faster than you expect. Your responsibilities grow. Your margin doesn't. And something important happens without you noticing. You start confusing limitation with personality. You think you're cautious, but really you're constrained. You think you don't like change, but really you can't afford mistakes. You think you're not ambitious anymore, but really ambition feels risky when there's no cushion underneath it. Money quietly becomes the filter through which you see everything. Opportunities don't look exciting. They look expensive. Time off doesn't look refreshing. It looks irresponsible. Helping others doesn't feel generous. It feels dangerous. Even rest feels like something you have to earn. And because this pressure is invisible, people don't talk about it honestly. They joke about being tired. They normalize burnout. They wear stress like a badge of maturity. But deep down, there's a sense that something isn't right. That life wasn't meant to feel like an endless series of trade-offs between stability and sanity. Yet, without realizing it, you might start shrinking your expectations. You aim lower to avoid disappointment. You adjust your dreams to fit your bank balance. You call it being realistic. And that's the quiet problem. Not that money causes dramatic breakdowns every day, but that it slowly trains you to live smaller than you need to. It teaches you to tolerate things that drain you, to postpone things that matter, to accept stress as normal, all while telling yourself you're doing the responsible thing. This is the stage most people never examine. They jump straight to advice, or motivation, or shortcuts. Why so many smart, hardworking people end up feeling stuck, without knowing exactly what's holding them there? Because the answer isn't laziness, it isn't lack of discipline, and it isn't a personal failure. It's something happening inside the mind, quietly shaping decisions long before logic gets involved. That's what we need to look at next. To understand why money has such a strong grip on your life, we have to stop talking about money for a moment and talk about the brain. Not the motivated version of the brain, not the logical version, the survival version. Your brain has one primary job: keep you safe, long before it cared about purpose, happiness, or long-term fulfillment. And in the modern world, money has become the symbol your brain uses to measure all of those things. Not because money itself is special, but because money represents access. Access to food, access to shelter, access to time, access to help when something goes wrong. So when money feels uncertain, your brain doesn't interpret that as a financial issue. It interprets it as danger. This is why money stress feels different from other kinds of stress. It's not loud, it's not sharp, it's constant. And when that alarm is on, your brain changes how it works. Here's what most people think is happening. They believe they're bad with money. They think they lack discipline. They tell themselves they just need to try harder or be more positive. But that's not what's actually happening. What's actually happening is something much simpler. Your brain is stuck in short-term mode. When resources feel scarce, the brain prioritizes immediate relief over long-term planning. That's not a flaw. That's survival. Imagine you're thirsty. You look for water now. Money stress does the same thing. It narrows your focus. It pulls attention toward what's urgent. It pushes everything else into the background. Not because you don't care, but the truth is, money pressure makes good choices harder to see. It reduces creativity. It lowers patience. It increases emotional reactivity. Small problems feel personal. Small setbacks feel catastrophic. Your brain isn't asking, what's the best long-term move? It's asking, how do I get through this week without something breaking? This is where a lot of shame comes from. You look back at past decisions and think, why did I do that? But you're judging survival mode decisions with a calm brain. That's not fair to yourself. When someone is constantly under financial pressure, it's like asking two people to run the same race, but one of them is carrying a heavy backpack they're not allowed to put down. And the worst part, the backpack is invisible. Another important thing happens when money feels uncertain. Your sense of time changes. When you feel safe, you think in years. When you feel unsafe, you think in days. This is why long-term goals feel abstract when money is tight. Retirement, investing, freedom, even rest. They feel like concepts for another life. Your mind keeps pulling you back to what needs attention now. Bills, deadlines, repairs, emergencies. This doesn't mean you're incapable of planning. It means your nervous system doesn't trust the future yet. And trust is a prerequisite for long-term thinking. There's also something else at play that people rarely talk about. Control. When money is limited, your sense of control shrinks. You might be working hard. You might be doing everything right. But if your margin is thin, life starts deciding things for you. You can't leave a bad situation easily. You can't take a break without consequences. You can't absorb surprises without stress. Over time, this creates a learned response. You stop expecting things to go well. You stop believing you have options. You stop feeling like effort leads to freedom. This is where people become emotionally numb around money. They say things like, I don't care about money, but what they often mean is, caring hurts too much. So the brain adapts. It lowers expectations. It avoids hope. It chooses predictability over possibility. Not because that's a better life, but because disappointment feels worse than stagnation. This is also why advice that sounds logical doesn't always work. Just budget better. Just save more. Just think long term. Those ideas assume a calm nervous system. They assume you're operating from stability. But when your brain is in protection mode, it doesn't respond to logic. It responds to relief. That relief might come from small comforts, small distractions, small decisions that make the day feel bearable. And then people wonder why progress feels slow. It's not because they're weak. It's because they're tired in a very specific way. Money stress is exhausting because it never fully resolves. There's always another bill, another decision, another what if. And because it's tied to survival, your brain treats it as urgent even when nothing is happening in the moment. That's why you can be sitting on the couch and still feel tense. Your body is preparing for a threat that hasn't arrived yet. So when we talk about money, we're not really talking about numbers. We're talking about safety, autonomy, the ability to exhale. And until those needs are met, it's incredibly hard to change behavior sustainably, which leads to the part most people never see. The cost of staying in this state doesn't show up immediately. It shows up slowly, over years, in ways that are easy to ignore at first. That's what we need to look at next. The most dangerous cost of money stress isn't what it takes from you today. It's what it quietly takes from you over time, because nothing explodes all at once. This is because of money. Instead, it's subtle. It shows up as drift. You stay in the same place a little longer than you meant to. You put off decisions that deserve attention. You tell yourself you'll deal with things when life calms down. But life rarely calms down on its own. And while you're managing the present, the future is quietly being shaped without your input. One of the first things money stress steals is time. Not just work hours. Mental time. Running numbers in your head. Replaying past decisions. Worrying about future ones. That energy has to come from somewhere. So it comes from creativity, from patience, from curiosity. Over time, your world becomes more functional and less imaginative. You focus on what's necessary instead of what's meaningful. Not because you don't value meaning, but because survival crowds it out. Another invisible cost is flexibility. When your financial margin is thin, every decision becomes heavier. A job offer isn't just about growth. It's about risk. A move isn't just about opportunity. It's about danger. A break isn't rest. It's a threat. So you default to what feels safest in the moment, even when safe slowly makes you miserable. Years can pass like this, not in chaos, in routine. And because nothing dramatic is wrong, you don't feel justified in wanting change. This is how people wake up one day feeling older than they expected to. Not physically, emotionally, avoiding risk, avoiding discomfort, avoiding the possibility of things getting worse. Another cost shows up in relationships. When money is tight, it limits how present you can be. Even when you're with people you love, part of your mind is elsewhere. Calculating, worrying, planning. Small irritations become bigger. Conversations feel heavier. You have less emotional space to give. Not because you don't care, but because stress uses up your bandwidth. You might find yourself snapping more easily, withdrawing without meaning to, avoiding situations that feel expensive emotionally or financially. Over time, this creates distance, not dramatic conflict, quiet disconnection. And because money isn't an easy thing to talk about honestly, that distance often goes unexplained. Then there's health, not in a sudden, obvious way, in a slow, wearing down kind of way. Chronic stress changes how your body operates. Sleep becomes later. Recovery takes longer. Small aches linger. You normalize feeling tired. You normalize tension. You normalize being a little on edge. And because you're functioning, you don't see it as a problem. But functioning isn't the same as thriving. One of the hardest costs to see is how money stress shapes identity. Over time, you start defining yourself around limitations. I'm not the kind of person who takes risks. I'm just practical. I don't need much. Those statements feel humble, but often they're adaptations. They're ways of making peace with a situation you don't feel powerful enough to change. And the longer you live inside those stories, the more real they feel. The curious part, the bold part, the hopeful part. Not because those parts disappeared, because there was no room for them. Another invisible cost is choice. When money is tight, opportunities don't feel like opportunities. They feel like threats. Anything unfamiliar comes with uncertainty, and uncertainty feels expensive. So you choose predictability over possibility, again and again, until one day, predictability feels like a cage. And then there's the long-term cost that almost nobody calculates. The cost of not starting. When you delay building any kind of financial cushion, you're not just staying where you are. You're making future progress harder. Because time matters. Not in a dramatic way. In a quiet, compounding way. The earlier you create even a small amount of breathing room, the more options you have later. The longer you wait, the steeper the hill feels. And this is where frustration turns into resignation for a lot of people. They tell themselves it's too late, that they missed their chance, that they should have started earlier, so they don't start at all. But here's the thing, the real cost isn't that you didn't know better before. It's that money stress makes it hard to believe change is possible now. It convinces you that stability is something other people get. That comfort is reserved for people who figured it out earlier. That you should just accept things as they are. And that belief is incredibly expensive. Because once you stop believing in change, behavior follows. You stop experimenting. You stop learning. You stop trying. Not out of laziness, out of self-protection. This is why the consequences of money stress are so powerful. They don't just affect your bank account. They shape your expectations, your decisions, your sense of what's possible. Which brings us to the most important moment in this conversation. The moment where something shifts. Not magically, not overnight, but enough to change the direction you're heading. That's what comes next. Let's bring this back to something simple. Not money, not numbers, not strategies. You. Because after everything we've talked about the kind of relief that lets your shoulders drop when you wake up, the kind that lets you make decisions without fear sitting in the room with you, the kind that gives you space to think beyond next week. Money matters because pressure matters. And when pressure is constant, it quietly shapes who you become. It decides how patient you are, how generous you can be, how brave you feel when opportunity shows up. This doesn't mean money is the meaning of life. Time, presence, choice, peace of mind. You don't need excess. You don't need luxury. You don't need to win some invisible competition. You just need enough. Enough that emergencies don't feel like disasters. Enough that rest doesn't feel irresponsible. Enough that your future feels like something you're moving toward, not something you're afraid of. And here's the most important thing to remember. If you felt stressed, stuck, or quietly exhausted by money, that doesn't say anything bad about you. It says you're human. It says your brain has been doing exactly what it's designed to do. Protect you in an uncertain environment. The goal was never to shame yourself for past decisions. The goal was never to suddenly become someone else. The goal is awareness. Because once you see how money pressure actually works, it loses some of its power over you. You stop calling survival failure. You stop confusing limitation with identity. You stop believing that wanting stability makes you shallow or greedy. You realize it makes you honest. Progress doesn't come from dramatic changes. It comes from small shifts in how you see your situation. From moving from, I'm bad with money, to, I've been under pressure for a long time. From, I'll deal with this later, to, I deserve a little breathing room. From, this is just how life is, to, this doesn't have to stay this way forever. No miracles, no hype, no overnight transformations. Just a gradual movement toward stability, toward choices that feel calmer, toward decisions that aren't made in panic, toward a future where money is a tool in your life, not the background noise controlling it. If there's one thing to take away from this, let it be this. Caring about money doesn't make you shallow. Ignoring it doesn't make you enlightened. Understanding it gives you options, and options change how life feels. You don't have to figure everything out today. You don't have to fix everything at once. You just have to stop pretending that the pressure you feel isn't real. Because once you acknowledge it, you can start designing a life that doesn't require constant endurance. A life with space, with margin, with room to breathe. And that's not asking for too much. That's asking for a life that feels livable, quietly, steadily, on your own terms.